Hi.
Welcome to Faces and Places today. I'm noticing I've got a little bit of feedback, so I'm just going to actually quickly put my headphones on. Sorry. Okay, hopefully you all can hear me a little bit better here. I have just a couple quick announcements, and I want to jump right into interviewing our guest today, Tanya Golesic from Jimmy Choo. As you all know, our fashion critiques were due last week. They're all now graded and in the system, so please go in and check things out sooner rather than later so you know if there's any issues or concerns. Lecture prep questions are due before class. I actually saw I got a lot this week, which is great. I know everyone's chomping at the bit to talk with Tanya. So please make sure that you email me back your emailed question after class on that same email chain. And as always, there'll be an attendance question at the end of the lecture. So for full credit, please send that to me on my email address. Lastly, the one-to-one career advice link is posted here, and I will put this whole deck live on our content under Blackboard. If you have not yet signed up for a time and would like one, please do. I think the first available is beginning in November, but there are lots of spots left. Just a reminder of social media. As you know, things get posted there a little bit earlier than emailed out to you, so it's a way to keep informed and know extra credit opportunities as well. And our remote guidelines, particularly if there's anyone who's joining us today for the first time, if you want to speak, please raise your hand and I will call on people in the order that you do. If there's any immediate or pressing or technology issues you want to call out to me or Tanya or the group, please type them in the chat function and I'll be following along there and I'll make sure to respond to you. And if you're speaking, please turn on your camera. And if that goes, if you raise your hand, preemptively turn on your camera so that by the time we get loaded and ready to go. And please only unmute yourself when you are ready to speak. This class is being recorded. Quick flash of our schedule, just the next 3 weeks coming up. We have Lauren Dudley Stevens next week, CEO and co-founder of Dudley Stevens. The week after, we have another group of co-founders, Maddie Grayson and September Voda from Tuckernuck. And following that, Sarah Tosetti, who's a costume designer on Broadway and also in Paris. With that, I would love to introduce you guys to Tanya Golesic. Since taking over Jimmy Choo business in 2016, as president of the Americas, now part of Capri Holdings, Tanya is leading the brand into expansion as a full luxury lifestyle omni-channel brand. Before joining Jimmy Choo, Canadian-born Golesic moved to Canada to serve as global CCO of Canada Goose, where she was charged with developing the brand into a top-performing global luxury player. Ms. Golesic also spearheaded the pre-IPO strategy for the company by increasing brand awareness and revenue in the US, Canada, Europe, and Japan. Prior to Canada Goose, Golesic was the global SVP of Sales and Planning at Marc Jacobs, part of LVMH, where she was credited with the launch of the business planning division at Marc by Marc Jacobs. This division helped to increase productivity and profitability for the brand, at which time Marc by Marc Jacobs was one of the leading contemporary accessory brands. Ms. Golesic also served as vice president and SVP role with both the Jones Group and Ralph Lauren in New York. Ms. Golesic serves on the Fashion Footwear Association of New York board and the Zagreb School of Economics and Management. For that, please join me in welcoming Tanya to our class.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
Good, even if not in person.
It's nice to see anyone in person at this point.
I know. Yeah, such a luxury.
Oh, gosh. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're so happy to. And you have an amazing path and a lot of amazing brands on your resume. Would love to hear a little bit in your own words your career path and how you've gotten to where you are.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I was actually born and raised in Canada. And by default, I guess, my mother was a retailer. So my mother owned 2 boutiques. And at that time, when I was a teenager, I would work, on the weekends or during the summer. And I really, at that time, always had a love of fashion. I don't know that retail was necessarily my thing, but I enjoyed working at my mother's store And what I really enjoyed was going on buying trips with her. So at that time, in Canada, where you go on buying trips is Toronto. So I would go to Toronto and Montreal with her every season, with different designers, and work collections with her. And I just noticed at that time when I was doing that with her, it was something that came really kind of natural to me, and it was something I really, really enjoyed. So that's how I got into fashion. And then when I was on one of these buying trips, there was a designer in Canada who's a little bit controversial actually right now, but also at that time he was the largest, probably wholesale Canadian designer and sold to Saks and Nordstrom. His name was Peter Nygaard, and that's where I went with my mother on one of the buying trips, and the person who at that time was the vice president of sales was in the showroom working with my mother and I, and noticed that I had kind of a natural inclination of being able to put things together and just kind of chat about the business. So at that moment, while I was in university, she asked me if I would be interested in working for them. And of course, I was studying political science, thinking I was going to be a lawyer, and no better time than the present. And I was like, yes, I would love to start working. So anyway, so I did work at Nygaard for a long time. I worked there for 10 years. And pretty early in my career, I knew that Canada wasn't necessarily the place to be for fashion. And I really wanted to come to New York. So at that time, I begged my boss to transfer me to New York, and that took 2 years, about 2 years. And I've been in New York for 20 years now. So, and then, like you said, I've worked for a lot of different fashion brands. I went to Ralph Lauren at that time, and then I went to Jones, Marc Jacobs, Canada Goose, and Jimmy Choo now for 4.5 years, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Um, so tell us about your role there at Jimmy Choo, kind of vision that's happening right now in these crazy times.
So I am the president of the Americas. So I oversee anything to do with Jimmy Choo for North America and then also South America. So Mexico, Brazil. So, during these weird times, I guess is kind of a different story to what I do now. What I do now is become more creative and try and figure out how to sell product to people who don't necessarily need to buy designer shoes. But I think the one thing that we can all kind of learn from this, and if you look at history, is that there's always opportunity in different situations, like a pandemic, for example. So the one thing that has been good about this time is that I've really been able to spend a lot of time with my team coming up with new ideas, coming up with what if COVID lasts for another, God forbid, 2 years? What can we do differently? So there's been a big shift, as I'm sure you know, into online. And so our e-com business, knock on wood, has been pretty phenomenal as a result of that. Stores are okay, but I think people are still, depending on where they live, I think they're still nervous to go into stores and to have that social interaction. So we're really trying to be pivot and be more agile in terms of how can we bring Choo to you? How can you bring the store and the experience to the client? So we actually, at the beginning of the summer, purchased a van, like a Mercedes Sprinter van, and branded it Jimmy Choo, and we bring Choo to you. So you can literally have the store brought to your house so that you don't have to leave your house, and we can bring it to you with one of our top sales representatives, and everything in terms of COVID and rules. Everyone wears a mask, and it's just trying to figure out how do you still engage people and keep them excited and wanting to buy product during this time. So there's the days of come on into my store and buy some shoes or bags is over. So I think it's up to everyone now in the fashion industry to figure out what works for their client, and especially a luxury client who actually probably has a more demanding type of role. So that's something we've been working on a lot.
Definitely. Is that in every market that you have a store that you're doing that, or only certain markets?
So we started in the Hamptons this summer, and so it's the Hamptons in New York is really what we did for the summer, and so we wanted to test it and see if it was successful. It was successful, and then we may buy more vans and put one on the West Coast. We may put one in Florida. But people are still willing to shop, but they want to have that experience. They don't want the experience in the store. So sometimes, it's a woman who wants to buy some shoes, and she has 3 girlfriends and they come, to her house and we bring the shoes there and they can try on their sizes and, we serve hors d'oeuvres or whatever to at least make it kind of a fun experience for them.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's something that we've been really working on a lot with our top clients. But anyone can do it. It's not just a top client. Anyone can do it.
that's very cool.
Yeah.
I feel like there is a running list of things that are positives that are coming out of COVID, and I feel like that's going to be the top of a lot of people's lists,
Yeah,
and something
exactly.
that may actually end up carrying over because it just is such an amazing work. I mean, a lot of those extra customer service things are going to be hard to stop because people are going to really enjoy them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So if you bring things to people, it seems to work well. I think people appreciate the fact that they don't have to be in an environment that they're nervous in or that they, don't necessarily want to leave their home or they're at home because their kids are being homeschooled. So it's just that little bright light of bringing shoes to people.
Yes, which is a great bright light at these times.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, could you tell us a little bit about, sort of like a week in the life of,
Sure.
yeah?
Yeah. A week in the life of me would be so I go to Milan 4 to 5 times a year because that's where the collection is presented to us. So that's when we go to Milan for a week and we see the entire collection for basically, the 6 months ahead. And the buyers, the planners, we look at all of our selling, we look at what the trends are, we see the presentation, the marketing, all of those fun things. So that's a lot of fun going to Milan and having that preview into what's to come. But then after we get home, that preview, you have to build strategies from that. And then after that, execute the strategies in retail, online, and then also with our wholesale partners, so department stores as well. So there's a lot of analytical data that feeds into that. There's a lot of trends that feed into that. And then there's a lot of different geographies that feed into that because people who shop in Beverly Hills are not necessarily the same as the people who shop in Miami, who shop in Atlanta, for example. So I do travel a lot. And then I also travel within the US quite often because we do have stores in almost every major city in the US and Canada, as well as South America. And then day to day, I'm in the office and, we have a showroom in New York, which is amazing. And so meeting with clients, whether it's the marketing piece of my job and meeting with, Vogue and Harper's Bazaar and Elle, or whether it's the finance piece of my job and meeting with, my CFO and team, or whether it's, meeting with the wholesale account. So there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of planning, and then there's a lot of strategy and execution and store visits and really keeping the teams motivated and excited about what's to come.
That's great. Thank you. Is Jimmy Choo doing anything currently to be more sustainable, or were there projects happening, I guess, before COVID as well? Because I know that's had to put a couple things on the back burner.
There were projects that were started and announced actually in, I believe it was February at the UN. So Jimmy Choo is now part of Capri Holdings. Capri Holdings is Jimmy Choo, Michael Kors, and Versace. So we have a commitment that the next 3 years to sustainability and how that's going to evolve over the next 3 years. And this was something that was signed at the UN back in February, that we are committing to do that. We are looking right now, in addition to that, at different types of materials. Obviously, we banned fur, we've banned a couple of other things over the past couple of years, but how do we look at different vegan products for shoes and bags? And just how do we also reduce our carbon footprint too, right? So all of those things, there's a huge committee that works on this all day long, and that is a goal that is happening now. Are we as far ahead in the world as a Patagonia, for example? No, we are not. But the good news is that we have signed something and made a commitment to make sure that we move in that direction. And so there's been a lot of steps that are being taken. And so, all three of those brands are very large brands too. So doing that at the same time is no easy feat, but it's something that we've committed to as a company that's being worked on as we speak.
Yeah, that's great. Is there other than large strategic initiatives, like, is there actually any operational day-to-day functionality that is the same between companies within Capri?
I mean, there are, so Versace just came on board, I think it's been a year and a half ago. So what usually ends up happening when you're forming a group is that it starts with logistics, it starts with IT, it kind of starts with all the back end things, because as companies are born and then they're built, and we're all at different stages in terms of where we are, and we're all different nationalities too. Jimmy Choo is originally from London. Versace obviously is from Italy, and then Michael Kors is American. So it's interesting because it's like you've got the UN and you're trying to get everyone on the same page with different types of personalities and different types of business practices, right? Because it's all cultural. So there's that piece first and foremost, but then there's the back end that I just mentioned, and even looking at CRM and stores and how we service our clients and what are those tools that we use, so that we're all on the same systems. And if anyone has worked in a large company and has had to either go through an ERP or a system upgrade, it takes time and it takes a lot of patience, but it is slowly but surely happening. And, all of these things happen because there's a cost benefit as well in terms of, having everyone on the same system, having everyone with the same, CRM system, logistics, warehouses, and you're able to benefit from that around the world globally, because they're the three global companies that are coming together as one. And right now we are all finally, Versace was supposed to move into our building. We work in Bryant Park. And so we have a Michael Kors office. I think we have about 9 or 10 floors between Michael Kors and Jimmy Choo. And now Versace has joined. They were supposed to move in March, but thanks to the world that we live in today, they moved in the last 2 weeks. So we're now in the same headquarters, which is super exciting. But there's so much work going on right now from, like I said, logistics, IT, legal, like sharing services or having a shared service type of business. But the one thing that is amazing about Capri and our CEO is that he's left the business units and brands to themselves. And what I mean by that is that you'd never want Jimmy Choo to be Versace, or Versace to be Michael Kors, or Michael Kors to be Jimmy Choo. So all of the brands have remained with their creatives intact, their businesses intact, so that we can continue to operate as that brand versus, kind of amalgamating brands together. So you'll never see that, but there are, some of the, I hate to say boring things like the logistics and things like that, which just help improve efficiency.
Yeah, that's great.
It makes the efficiencies so much better. So that's what is being worked on too as we speak.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what the goal of this class, I think I've told you, is to give everyone a little bit of an idea about different roles in the industry. And you kind of came up in sales. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to them a little bit about what that role's like, and what it means to be an account? Yeah, to be an account executive in sales, or
I love being in sales. I miss being in sales. I kind of still am in a way, because you always default to that if you're a salesperson. I think working in sales is really where you get to learn everything. It's like a full 360 view. And what I mean by that is that you're in front of clients, if you're working with wholesale accounts like Saks or Bergdorf, for example, you work with design, you work with logistics, because in addition to selling the product has to get delivered. It has to get delivered on time. People have to pay their bills. There's a marketing component. You have to make sure that the wholesale accounts are following your marketing guidelines. So I feel like sales is the point person for almost everything in fashion. And so you have to have a lot of patience. So you have to be able to pivot a lot. And you also have to be a pretty open personality. And what I mean by that is that when you go from dealing with people in finance to people in logistics to people in design, everyone's a different personality. Creative people are very different than financial people. So I think the key to success in sales is really understanding how to navigate those personalities. And it's amazing how much that can help you in your career in sales. And then, of course, selling, right? Selling the product, convincing whether it's wholesale accounts or retailers why your brand is great. You have to do a ton of analysis to explain to them why they need to buy something that they bought the year before or something new based on their sell-through. So in addition to loving product, you also have to have the analytical financial piece of understanding what worked and what didn't work. So, because you'll be challenged all day long, as you know, on, things that, you sold a collection the last season, but the collection was a total bomb and they've decided that they want to take a break from the collection. Well, you have financial people who have budgets who are telling you what your budget is. So you need to figure out how you're going to make that work. But it has to be smart. It's not just a gut feeling that, okay, well, we think this collection is better. There has to be facts. You have to be able to look at the numbers, look at everything, and put together the story, and the story that's appropriate for that retailer in order to make that sale. So I feel like sales is just, when you're in sales, you learn everything. You learn how to unpack samples, you learn how to steam samples, you learn how to do just about everything there is, get people coffee in the showroom. I mean, there's just so much, and I'm so grateful that I started there and I had that opportunity, because I do feel like, and it's not a bad thing, but I have so many young people who say to me, oh, I want to be in marketing and PR. And then I say to them, okay, well, what do you want to do after that? And they say, oh, I want to be the president or the CEO. And I always say to them, you need more than just marketing and PR if you want to be the president or the CEO of a fashion company or a brand, because you need to understand all aspects, which includes the part that I just mentioned, the financial piece too. So I feel like sales is just such a great place to start to learn all of those things. And then when you're in sales and you're dealing with marketing and PR and you're seeing really what the process is, then you can then decide, hey, I actually prefer marketing and PR. But I feel like sales is like a buffet. You get to choose everything and then figure out what you like the best.
Yeah, that's a really great way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Very smart. As I mentioned, you've worked at some fantastic brands, especially Jimmy Choo. And I think one of the things that is admirable, particularly about Ralph Lauren and Jimmy Choo and Marc Jacobs, is just how well they maintain their brand integrity out there. How hard is that to do? And, what kind of strategies do you have to keep in mind when you're working?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult. I think if you work for a luxury brand, whether you work at Ralph Lauren or Marc Jacobs or Jimmy Choo, I think the discipline that comes with understanding, you really need to first and foremost immerse yourself in the brand. So you need to sit back for the first couple of months and understand the brand DNA, right? You need to understand that this is who Marc Jacobs is, this is what he stands for, and this is the brand. You have to look the part. And what I mean by that, one of my pet peeves, and people who worked at Ralph Lauren experience this too, is you don't walk into Marc Jacobs and wear Ralph Lauren. You don't walk into Ralph Lauren and wear Balenciaga. You don't walk into Jimmy Choo and wear Christian Louboutin. I mean, so that's like 101. You need to, as I say, drink the Kool-Aid, which means you're so excited that you got a job at a brand that you really want to work for, then really, really, really be part of that brand. Look the part, wear the shoes, wear the brand, and be proud, because people know as soon as they see you, the first thing they do, if you say I work at Jimmy Choo, they look at my feet. Or if you work at Ralph Lauren, they look to see what you're wearing. Like, that's what comes with the job. So I think that's super important. And then while you're in that role, then take the time to be with the people who've been at that company for a long time. Listen to all of the briefs that come from the designers in terms of what their inspiration or what they believe in, and really immerse yourself in that culture, because that's the key to success in terms of brand discipline. Because everything after that, then you know what kind of the Bible is in terms of, or the playbook, I should say, of what's acceptable at Marc Jacobs, what's acceptable at Ralph Lauren, that, when you're placing yourself in a marketing catalog at Saks and you work at Ralph Lauren, you're probably not going to be sitting next to Rick Owens. Like, you have to understand what that brand stands for, and then who the friends of the brand are that are acceptable to be part of that. And then it goes along with the brand integrity, whether people are, you have to protect the brand, make sure things are on sale at the right time or not on sale, because that also happens. So there's a lot of discipline that comes into, you're basically protecting the brand at all times, and that's your job.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of sales, I know you're at Canada Goose, and I feel like they're very well known for not doing markdowns. So I mean, that must be a very hard line in the sand to draw.
Yeah, that's interesting.
particularly in outerwear, where you could just have
Exactly.
a warm winter and no snow and no coat sold.
Exactly.
Where's been your favorite place to work over the years?
I think Jimmy Choo is definitely I have two favorites. It's Jimmy Choo and Marc Jacobs, hands down. I was at Marc Jacobs when Marc was the creative director of Louis Vuitton at the same time. And I was the SVP over Marc by Marc Jacobs, which was a massive brand at that time. And everyone in the world had a Marc by Marc bag. And I think Marc just comes from this kind of creative genius world that very few people do. And he's a pioneer, and he just stands for so much, and it was just amazing working there. I had an amazing team, and as part of LVMH, so of course LVMH is one of the premier houses in terms of all of the brands that they have. So I think that was just such an amazing experience, and being able to go to Paris and review the budgets and do all of those things and go to the shows. So Marc Jacobs was definitely an amazing experience. And Jimmy Choo, I mean, I've been here for 4.5 years now, and we have a female creative director, Sandra Choi, which is amazing because there's very few brands that have had female creatives as their as the brand leader. So that's amazing, and Sandra is hugely talented. And Jimmy Choo has such a amazing DNA and history, from Sex and the City to Princess Diana, to just being so well known in all of the award shows, red carpet. We just did a collaboration with Timberland, which was a massive success, and so many great people like Golesic and Megan Thee Stallion, and all these people who love Jimmy Choo, right, and wore the Timberland collaboration. But there's just a lot of great history with Jimmy Choo, and it's really a company that supports women, and shoes give everyone confidence, and I think that's such a great story to tell. So I would say those two are my two favorites so far.
Yeah, that's great. Is there a least favorite that you feel comfortable talking about, or a lesson learned, I guess?
There is. I would say for me, Canada Goose was a tough one for me, and it was a tough one for me because 20 years ago, when I was in my 20s, I decided that I wanted to live in New York and move to New York and be part of this big fashion world. And to go back to Canada, 15 or 16 years later, was tough. I mean, even though I'm Canadian, I think when you live in New York City for such a long time, and you work in New York City, and you work in fashion in New York City, which is a whole other level of kind of like crazy and exciting and nonstop. I think when you go somewhere else, like Canada, for me, it was a difficult transition from a cultural standpoint. So I would say that was a little bit challenging, living in Toronto again. And I love Toronto. Like, I love going back to Canada, but I don't want to live in Canada, and I don't want to work in Canada, just because the pace is much slower. And hey, maybe when I'm older and that's kind of where I want to, live, then I understand that. But I think for me, New York and fashion in New York, or even, Europe, is just, it's a different level. And I found like I was going backwards by going back, and that's not disrespectful at all to Canada or anything, because it was a global role, so I traveled all the time. But I felt culturally, for me, it was not a great fit, and yeah, I mean, but I learned a ton, so that's the good news and all that. And you always learn a ton, yeah, good or bad.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's actually one of the themes that I've been talking about a lot with students throughout the semester, because we're all sitting at home. Some of us in India, some of us in Korea, some of us in New York City. Just the different cities that you can work in, the different opportunities that are out there, and these different personalities of cities.
Totally. Yeah.
So I find it very interesting that you were able to find a role in your hometown to go back check out, but you had kind of drunk the Kool-Aid of New York and were not so into it by the time you went and did it.
I did drink the Kool-Aid in New York, yes.
But it's a very important factor, I think, in making that city decision for yourself. What type of speed are you looking for?
Absolutely. I think it's hugely important. And I think that anyone who can learn that at an early stage, because I think when we're young, we're just so desperate, like, okay, no, I want to work for this brand, this brand, this brand. And you're like, I don't care what city it's in, I'll go. But I think you really need to, and I always say this, and this is the advice I give to everyone all the time, is listen to your gut. And I didn't listen to my gut about Canada Goose. Like, I knew I didn't want to move back to Toronto, and I voiced that, but I still did it. And I was like, oh, I'll figure it out when I get there. And it's kind of like, yeah, that probably wasn't necessarily, and that's probably the only time so far, knock on wood, in my career anyway, that I haven't listened to my gut. But I learned that that'll never happen again. So that's a good thing.
That is a good lesson, for sure.
It's important to take that time to understand what exactly you want,
Yeah. I have a good friend that followed you to Toronto, and she stayed. It was a good move for her, right?
Exactly.
Just all depends on where you are.
Exactly.
So what does your team look like at Jimmy Choo? You do retail and also wholesale. So I don't know what part of your business is bigger. And
so at Jimmy Choo, when I started, I would say that wholesale and retail were about 50-50, and we really pulled back on wholesale. I think, and everyone knows this, I'm not saying anything that's controversial, I don't think. I think that the U.S. department store business, even though it's massive compared to the rest of the world, it's very challenged. And I think, at that time when we took a look at what we needed to do, we were in too many stores. For example, at Nordstrom, we were in too many stores at Saks. So we really pulled back on these little stores and little places where we were doing no business. So today we have a much healthier balance of wholesale. So it's definitely retail / omni, which is our e-com, which has been very successful, thank goodness. And wholesale, we've shrunk to the size it should be, because just because we're Jimmy Choo and we're a luxury brand, it doesn't mean that we have to be in every single city in America, because it's just not appropriate for some cities. So we went back and we were strategic about the doors that we decided to exit, so that we weren't over distributed in a lot of cities. So right now, retail, wholesale, retail and e-com, which is omni, is really our focus, because that's where you can do the best storytelling from a brand perspective. Because no one's ever going to protect your brand the way the brand does itself. So you're able to do the buy the way you want, so that the client can always see the best of the best and have the best experience in your own stores. And we try and do the same with wholesale. We try to recommend what the fashion group is for the season, or the color story is for the season. But at the end of the day, because you have so many other brands sitting next to you on a floor, a lot of the time buyers will buy you for a function. So they think that Jimmy Choo pointy toe pump is the best pointy toe pump, they'll buy the Jimmy Choo pointy toe pumps, but they won't buy them from Chanel. From Chanel, they'll buy booties. And that's really tough, because you do have designers who design full collections, and you have someone who comes in and kind of picks and chooses parts of your collection. So we're really focused on continuing to develop retail and in e-com, and that's really where we're seeing wins and successes.
That's great.
Yeah.
Ella, sure. I think you have a question. You there, Ella?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, I'm just turning on my video. Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
You're amazing. Thank you so much for all your advice. And so my question is what is it required to keep up the luxury of a brand, and how is this possible while it gets bigger? Can it lose its authenticity or luxury?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think people can lose their authenticity when they start trying too hard. And what I mean by that is that if you're Jimmy Choo, or if you're Marc Jacobs, and then all of a sudden you decide that you want to be Uggs, or you want to be, listen, I mean, look at during COVID right now, Jimmy Choo, we're known for high heels and for, sexy, confident styles, but there's not a lot of women who are sitting at home wearing high heels right now, right? But that doesn't mean that we pivot and start making, furry boots like Uggs. It means that we start, we do flats, we do sneakers, we concentrate on other things, but you don't walk away from what your DNA is, right? So as long as you always stick to your DNA and you know that you're Jimmy Choo, then that is your authenticity. And I think you guys have probably heard this quote a million times, but a really good marketing test is that if you look at a magazine and you put your hand over the brand and you're still able to know that it's Ralph Lauren or that it's Marc Jacobs, then you're doing your job, right? Because as soon as you start training yourself and you continue to tell the same story, the same story, the same story, so that people understand what the brand stands for, then that's really when you're successful. And I think you could do that with most Ralph Lauren ads. I think you can do it with most Jimmy Choo ads. I think you can do it with most Marc Jacob ads or anything, Dior. So I think that's hugely important in terms of authenticity, because young people like you know when a story's not real, and young people are way smarter than we were, that's for sure. So I think people can tell what's a real brand and what's a fake brand in this day and age. So I think authenticity is key. In terms of luxury, luxury is really about the client and the experience. So you can never walk away from how you treat your clients. You have to treat your clients and all of your clients, and remember that sometimes this is their first experience at Jimmy Choo, and how do you get them to come back and bring their kids back and stay with you for 20 or 30 years, right? So it's really about amazing experiences, and client relationships and service. And I think that's what sets luxury apart from non-luxury, right? It's having that experience and making someone feel special, and making them feel like they're the only person that's ever bought a Jimmy Choo shoe, and continuing that conversation with them all the time, knowing their birthday, knowing their kids' names, taking them out for dinner, sending them flowers, things like that. So I think in luxury, that's really, it's really about experience versus anything else. That's what keeps it that way. Does
Thank
that
you
make
so
sense?
much. Yeah. Yes.
Before we move too far away from the Toronto topic, I'm also just wondering, you travel a ton for work, Milan, but also all over the country and right now for Jimmy Choo stores. Is there a favorite place that you've gone, or any interesting city that?
I think in my other roles as well. Listen, I love Milan. Milan's fun. But I do love Tokyo. I love Japan. I love Hong Kong. I love Paris. I think there's just so many great places in the world, and fashion is so diverse and it's so different by country. And I think learning that piece of it, and if you ever have the experience to work in a global company and have a global role, is so important, because not everything is the best in America or the best in China or the best in Japan. Everyone has their own thing, and a lot of the time I would say it's the 80-20 rule, where a lot of the time in luxury, people are about 80% the same in terms of their taste and their fashion. And I would say that there's that 20% cultural difference, but in order to be successful, you have to understand that, so that you do have different products and different things for different regions, and even different marketing at this point. Anyone who still uses traditional marketing where you're using American models in Japan or in China, you really, or Korea, for example, it's so important that people, because everyone has their own identity, and it's super important now that people understand who you're talking to, that we're not all exactly the same. We don't look the same. We don't act the same. And if you're smart and your company is smart and the brand is smart, then they will definitely pay attention to that and make sure that, whether it's e-com, social media, or just product, that they are talking to those different audiences and addressing those different clients so that they feel special as well.
Yeah, that's great. What about the most interesting person you've met along your travels?
Interesting person. I think any of the creative people that I've worked for, like I had the opportunity when I worked at Ralph Lauren to meet Ralph Lauren, which is like mind blowing. Same thing with Marc Jacobs, being in the elevator with him, going to the office, Sandra Choi, who's our creative director. I think creative people, I think I have such a respect and even admiration, because what they do and what they create is just mind blowing. And for me, I'm not creative, right? So I think it's just something that attracts me to them, because it's a mind that is just so fascinating and so talented, and being able to build brands based on your own creativity, I think is huge. So I've been lucky enough working, for these companies to work with some really, really amazing creative people and met them too. And I mean, they're legends. Ralph Lauren's a legend. Marc Jacobs is a legend. Sandra used to make shoes for Princess Diana. I mean, exactly. So they're all legends. And
yes.
so I've been lucky enough in my life to be able to meet those people just throughout my career.
That's great. Throughout your career, when you've made a move, have you ever had to rely on your network to move yourself forward?
No. Well, I would say no, because anytime that I've moved to another company, it's been because a recruiter has called to recruit me. So it's never been through friends that work in fashion. It's never been, where I've called up and someone and said, hey, I'm dying to work at whatever company, and they happen to work there. So I find that in the fashion industry, because it is a small industry, that a lot of the time the recruiters end up being your network too. So you'll know recruiters that have gone from, LVMH to Kering or to wherever, to different companies. And so you see familiar faces along the way, but I've never had a job through someone that I know, if that makes sense. It's always been through a recruiter, and then I've gone the old-fashioned way of going for 55 million interviews and hopefully getting the job or not getting the job sometimes. But it's never been through networking. However, networking is massively important because this industry is so small, and you do end up meeting people and running into people, year over year, and different brands. And there's a lot of, there's not that many brands anymore. So you do end up meeting people along the way that you continue to see throughout your career.
Yeah. How about the other direction, with bringing people from your network?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of that. Yes, absolutely. So one thing I think that it's kind of a double-edged sword. And what I mean by that is that, yes, of course, it's great to work with people that you know and that you trust and that you've maybe taken from company to company. However, the other piece I've learned is that it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that once you get to a company, you have to be there for a couple of months to understand the culture. Because just because you work with, Cindy at Ralph Lauren, that doesn't mean that Cindy at Ralph Lauren is going to fit in at Marc Jacobs, right? Because the culture is very different. So I don't think it's smart to bring people from your past just because you know them and you think they're good at something, unless they work culturally, because culture is huge and it plays a part in everything in all companies. And so you want to make sure, and not only that, it's not even that you're bringing someone that you've worked with in your past, but you also want that person to be successful and you want to be successful. So a lot of the time too, you can set yourself up for failure doing that if you don't pay attention to the nuances within the company. And you can bring someone from one company to another company and they can absolutely fail. And then you feel awful because you brought them to a new company and they had a terrible experience. So yeah, but I absolutely, in every single company that I've worked at, I have people that I've worked with in my past. And once I trust you and once I know that we work well together, I'll take you everywhere and anywhere with me if you want to go. That's the key. But if you, that's fine too. But I think it's really important. I think the only way you can be successful in any company, fashion or otherwise, is to have a very, very, very strong team. And you have to be able to give them the leeway and the trust to be able to do their jobs and not be a micromanager, because I think being a micromanager is a kiss of death, because you never allow people to kind of grow their own wings or spread their own wings, and that's not fun for anyone, to be in a career where they never get to experience anything new, or so yeah, I absolutely love bringing people to different places.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I feel like that in my experience, there's a risk involved with it. The risk number one being, is the new company going to like them? And I don't just mean like your boss, I mean also, your coworkers, and is that going to be a fit? or is it going to make a target for them? And are they going to be happy because you have a certain amount of responsibility for them once you've pulled them over?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's true.
It's a
It's a
tricky line to walk.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But I think obviously it goes without saying that people who work hard are rewarded and
100%.
get brought along for these cool opportunities when it fits.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's great. I was speaking with a student last week about recruiters and how important they are, even at the early stages of a career, and how you shouldn't be afraid to talk with a recruiter and learn a little bit more about what you can expect out there, because it can be a great resource to just tell you the lay of the land, what you can expect salary-wise, what you can expect from different ways, and people shouldn't be afraid to respond to a recruiter that may reach out.
No, it's such a good thing to do, and it's so good to just interview, because it's hard to interview, and the more practice you get, the better you get at it, and then you're like, okay, this is so good now, because in the beginning you don't know what to say, because you always get the standard questions of what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and you have to come up with something that's like, oh, is it too good, is it too bad, or that interviewing all the time is such a good thing. And it doesn't even matter if you want the job or not, just interview, because it gives you so much experience, and then you understand what the questions are going to be, and then they eventually there ends up being a pattern, and so you're not nervous when you're interviewing for a job that you actually really want.
Yeah, that's a great tip, for sure. Well, I think my last question before I turn it over to students is, what piece of advice do you have for students to make them more hireable?
There's two things, and one is kind of boring, and that is just to work hard. And what I mean by that, people are like, yeah, okay. But I don't mean work hard. I mean outwork everyone you know. Because if you're that person who will go to the next level and will do anything and everything that your job requires, and you don't go home until it's finished, your boss will always remember that, and they will always know that you're the person who's really there because you want to be there, and you will be promoted because of that. And when everyone else goes out the door at 6 p.m. and you stay until 8 p.m., and I'm not saying to stay and do nothing and just look at your computer screen. I'm saying to add value. Like if you add value, or you can make your boss or someone's life more easy and help them with something that they're doing, you will get, like you said, you will be rewarded for that 10 times over, because there's just so many people right now, and I'm seeing, unfortunately, I obviously interview a lot of young people who are interns or people who are getting out of school, but there just seems to be right now this thing where it's like, okay, I have a life, so it's 6 o'clock and I'm leaving, but meanwhile, you were supposed to, I'm making it up, finish, logging all the shoes from Vogue for the day, but you leave and you've only done 50% of it. And so what happens is that the next day you come, you're overwhelmed, your boss is yelling at you because, well, not yelling at you, but your boss is annoyed because you're supposed to be on another job by that time, and you just decided to leave because you wanted to go and have drinks with your friends. Now, I'm also not saying don't have a social life. I do think that's obviously massively important too, but you just have to understand what's important. And if you are that person who goes over and above all the time and really shows interest, you will be promoted, you will move, you'll get to do anything you want to do in your career. And, that's one thing. When all of my friends were graduating from university and going on a year's tour of Europe and having fun, I didn't do that. I worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. And now, 20 years later, I have so many people say, oh my God, how did you get to where you are? And how come you're the president of the company? And I'm like, because I didn't go to Europe that first year. And
I go to Europe now.
I work 24 hours a day. And I know that sounds wickedly boring, but it pays off in the end, So that's the advice that I would always give any young person. And then the other advice that I was always given, never ask someone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. So I think it's really important to be humble and to remember where you came from. And just because you're the CEO of a company, that doesn't mean you can't get your own coffee. That doesn't mean that you can't help someone with something. Or, we all start in the same place, and never lose sight of that, because I find that there's a lot of people in this world today in fashion and in other businesses who have kind of lost it, right? And they have a very high opinion of themselves, and egos can drive people to very bad places, and and then it becomes your downfall too. So that's when you're not promoted anymore. That is your last job because your ego was, you just don't remember who you are. And so I think that's a huge important thing that I learned as well.
Those are great, great tips. Actually leads me to want to ask you one more question before I turn it over. I think clearly given your first response to students on, working hard and stuff, how do you keep yourself so passionate about your job? Because it seems like you are very passionate about
I am so passionate about
I mean, and I follow your Instagram feed. I see, how beautifully Jimmy Choo fits into your real world life too. That's great.
No, I absolutely, and any brand I've worked for, I absolutely love what I do. I love working in this industry. I've always wanted to work in this industry. So I guess one thing I will say, and I hate when people say I was lucky, but I do think, yes, of course, hard work plays the biggest role, but I do think I was lucky in that I knew that fashion was what I wanted to do, right? Even though I was going to be a lawyer, that was kind of my mother's passion, for me to be a lawyer. But I knew that as soon as you're passionate about something and as soon as you love something, you just never want to not do it. So therefore, there's passion right away. It's like when you have that, your favorite meal and you're like, oh, this is the best. You just have that feeling every day, like, because it's something that you genuinely enjoy, you look forward to. You get the what everyone says is that it's not work, it's your passion. It is work, everything's work at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I mean, you just, I just get so excited. I love what I do. I'm so lucky, I get to wear Jimmy Choo's every single day of my life. I mean, who doesn't want to do that, right? So
yeah,
you know, when you're in college and you're lucky enough to know that you really want to do something, that you really want to be a designer, or you really want to be in PR, then it's like every day, just be grateful for that and go out and do the best job you can. And like you said, and like I said, you'll be rewarded. And when you're rewarded, you're happy. I mean, you're just happy all the time because you're doing this thing that's just such an amazing experience. And I can't imagine, doing anything else. So, the day that goes away is the day that I will no longer be in fashion, but it hasn't gone away, and I hope it never does.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm sure there are a lot of questions out there. Students, does anyone raise their hand? Duyan, do you want to start? Duyun. Sorry, I probably said that wrong.
Hi.
Hi.
What do you think is the most important thing in the fashion industry?
What do I think is the most important thing?
Yes, in the fashion industry.
Meaning, what do I think is like the most important thing I've learned, or what's the most, sorry, just so I understand, so I give you the right answer.
Like shoes fashion.
In shoes or in anything?
Yeah, shoes.
What do I think is the most important thing? I don't know that it's specific to shoes or handbags or ready to wear. I think it goes back to the original conversation about brand and being part of something that you believe in, right? So something that you personally love, and you may not love shoes, you may love handbags and want to work for a brand that only does handbags, or you may love ready to wear, or you may love everything and then you work for a brand that does everything. So I think it's really identifying what you believe in and what you like, what you identify with, that maybe I'm making it up, that Dior is your everything and you can see yourself in a Dior ad all day long, and that's what you're passionate about. And then if and when you go and you work in one of those brands, while you're there, I think that's when you learn, as part of the culture and the experience, whether it's shoes that you like, whether it's ready to wear that you like, whether it's bags, or if it's just everything, which is even more amazing because I personally like everything. But I think that it's really up to you and what you identify with most. And I think it's different by person, right? Because I think people like different things. So I think did I answer your question the right way?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Claire, I have you next.
Hi, thanks for coming in here today. Okay, so I have a couple questions. First one is, what do you consider the most important advice for running a brand or company or management or that kind of thing?
What do I think is yeah. What I think is the most important advice for running a brand?
Yeah.
Okay, I think the most important advice, I think it goes back to what we were talking about. If it's luxury, for example, actually, I lie. It's not. It doesn't even have to be luxury. I think understanding what the strategy is and setting that strategy and never deviating from that strategy. So whether it's about and understanding the brand and the disciplines around the brand, the DNA around the brand, never waver from that. Because if you do waver when you're the head or the representative for this brand and you waver, people will see that and they will not necessarily believe your story, right? So I think storytelling has to be super clear, super concise. Now, do I think that people have made mistakes? Storytelling 100%. And do I think you can change your course? Yes, but I don't think you can change your course too many times. So I think understanding what is and doing all of that backstory homework of history and what something stands for is super important. And that goes back to earlier about that when you work for a brand, just to kind of not hang out, but really sit and study and learn everything that there is. And you may one day say, is not what I'm into at all, and this is not what I thought this would be, and that's fine. And you go to another brand that is that way. So I think staying the course is super important.
Okay. Question is, what is the most rewarding part of like being in the luxury goods industry versus what's the most challenging part?
Oof, there's a tough question. The most rewarding part is, as cheesy as this sounds, and again, I don't know that this is necessarily specific to luxury or if this is cosmetics or anything. I think working in fashion where you get a lot of satisfaction is that you're able to change someone's mood like that. And what I mean by that is that, perfect example, something I find so rewarding is that we have so many women who come to us and they're getting married and they want to wear Jimmy Choo. And just having to be with that person, that client, and see how excited they get and just to see how their mood changes and how people, stand up straight, or people are like, oh my gosh, like I look like a movie star. Just giving someone minutes of feeling good in this crazy world that we live in, I think is so rewarding. Helping people, giving people shoes. We give shoes to women who are, single mothers who are homeless or interviewing for their first jobs, things like that, where you're able to give back and give people, someone who can't afford a pair of Jimmy Choos and giving them that opportunity and that first time, that just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get this job. I'm going to be the CEO of this company. Just this confidence thing that comes over women, and to see them get so excited is amazing. So that's rewarding. The most challenging, I think challenging piece is really trying to weave the financial and the creative together. That at the end of the day, yes, of course, we make pretty shoes and bags. That's amazing. But at the end of the day, I also need to make sure that I'm not paying, that my rent in my store on Madison Avenue exceeds my sales. And I need to make sure that, there's commerce behind it, right? It's a business. So yes, it's pretty. Yes, it's fun. Yes, people get excited because they're going to get married in a pair of Jimmy Choos. But at the same time, you're also managing people's livelihood. So you have to be successful because you have this team that works so hard for you, and you have this amazing brand. You also have to be smart in your choices financially. And if you're not, then that can turn into a very bad situation. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that, especially with things like COVID, where people don't want to come into stores anymore. And what we were talking about at the beginning, like, what what do you do? How do you motivate teams? How do you get people excited? And what can we do differently? And, even during COVID, and so many people have had to go through this, and having to furlough people, and knowing that, they have families and they have kids at home, and this is their life. So so that's a pretty recent answer for you, because that just happened. Luckily, we're back in business, which is great, and meaning that people are not furloughed anymore and stuff. But that's not a fun part of the job, and I take that very seriously, because it affects people's personal lives. So I would say that's probably the most difficult, when you have to make decisions like that.
Thank you.
Janice, I have you next.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
So my name is Janice. So one of the assignments that we had for this class was to attend a fashion event and comment on it. But obviously, because of COVID, we were allowed to watch fashion documentaries instead. One of the documentaries I chose to watch was from the series 7 Days Out. It's on Netflix, where one of the episodes focused on the Chanel 2018 Spring Haute Couture show. And for me, it served as the affirmation that I was on the right track with what I want to accomplish with my life as a designer and things like that. And I think doubt is really important, because how can you ever be sure that something is right for you if you're not asking questions?
100%.
Right. So my question to you is, what points in your fashion career did you receive confirmation that you were on the right track to becoming who you wanted to be?
Oh God, the good questions. I think in my career, this probably sounds like such a cheesy answer, but the Captain Obvious here, I'm going to give you an obvious question. I think as you go through your career, and I started as an account executive, right? So throughout my career, there were two things. One was getting promoted in my jobs. So going from account executive to a director to a sales manager. So that gives you confirmation, right? Because that means someone's telling you you're doing a good job, because they're giving you more responsibility. But the second piece is really being contacted by recruiters, and having those conversations with other brands. Hello, I'm from Canada. I'm working for this little designer by the name of Peter Nygaard. And then all of a sudden I get a call from Ralph Lauren, from a recruiter at Ralph Lauren. And I'm like, oh my, what is going on here? So there are all those things in your life. And then it's just like, wait a second, I just got a call from Marc Jacobs. These things are mind blowing, right? And then I went to Canada Goose, and the Canada Goose, I got a phone call from Jimmy Choo saying, we're looking for a president. So for me, and it's just I still feel like I'm 10 years old. It's like, what? You know what I mean? What? Marc Jacobs wants me to come and work there? So those for me are little things, as well as being promoted, right? Because you don't just go from being an account executive to a president.
Right.
But when you get these phone calls, because what happens throughout your career is that you have people who talk about you, good and bad. But the good ones are the ones that then tell the recruiters, or your reputation in the industry is good, and that's how people find out about you. And then you get these amazing phone calls, and then you're just like, whoa, how's this happening? So that's what I feel like happened to me, and that was kind of okay, check, I'm in the right business, I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing it well, because people want me to work for them. So I think that's really how you see it throughout your career. It starts with getting promoted and working hard, and then getting phone calls, and going to other companies. So, but by you watching this Chanel show, that's amazing. But it's so cool when you see something that you want so badly, right? And it's just yeah, I'm done. This is it. We're done. This is where I'm going. Blah blah blah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but that's the best feeling, because there's a lot of people in the world who don't have that,
Right.
and they're lost. And I thank God every day that I knew that, because there's some people who they're like, maybe I'll be in fashion, maybe I'll be a chef, maybe I'll be something else. And I would just be crazy if I was like that, because I need a direct path. So just follow your dreams, and never, ever, 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 ever stop, and work harder than everyone. And then I'll be watching you on Zoom, and I'll be asking you questions about being the CEO of Chanel.
I know whatever you're designing behind you looks amazing with those feathers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, my Halloween costume.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question in the chat from Sharon. She asks, what gets lost when a brand joins a conglomerate?
What gets lost? Well, so far I'm 3 years into it, and nothing has been lost yet. I think it's a really good question, because a lot of people think just because a brand is part of a conglomerate that it is not necessarily a good thing, and I would hugely disagree with that, because what actually ends up happening in LVMH is probably the best example of that, because they own so many brands. Is being bought by a large company allows you to have opportunities that you've never had before. And what I mean by that, it means usually cash flow, which is a huge thing, because in fashion, a lot of smaller brands, cash is not easy to come by, especially now in this day and age. So you're able to market differently. You're able to, where you were using, I'm making this up, of course, where you're able to use, mainstream models who, or just local models, you're getting to use Bella Hadid, or, it just takes everything to another level. So as long as the conglomerate is, and the management, which is at Capri, and I've experienced for the last 3 years, is focused on allowing the brands to run as Jimmy Choo or Versace or Michael Kors, and they stay true to that, then there's no negative. It's all positive, because it just allows to take the brand from, a 500 million to a billion, or a billion to 10 billion. That's how, huge brands are built. So I'm all for it, and I think it's great. Now, are there growing pains when you're trying to figure out the logistics and shipping from certain warehouses and combining things? Absolutely. With IT, whether you have SAP or whether you do everything on an Excel spreadsheet, absolutely. But those are just little growing pains. And at the end of the day, there's a bigger picture where you will benefit from, a greater good of it all. So for us, it's been great. And at LVMH, was a huge conglomerate as well. It was amazing too, because the brands really operated as the brands.
I'll chime in as well, because my time at G3 Apparel, there was definitely a lot of brands joining or leaving, and one of the things at that level, which is not luxury, it's more everyday Macy's fare. You can save so much money on a production standpoint by using the same factory, because one thing maybe you guys don't realize yet is that the more units you buy of something, the less the item will cost you, because you can buy more of the fabric and you can buy more units for that specific factory overseas. So that's a huge factor, I think, at that level.
Totally.
But I will say that they oftentimes would say, hey, this thing is working so great for Calvin Klein. Why don't you just slap the Kenzie label on it and sell it over on your floor, and maybe you guys will sell it really well. And then I think, to your point, you start to lose your brand identity, and there's none of that, special sauce that makes that brand so amazing that the customer reacts to. So it's definitely a fine line.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Violetta, I have you next.
One second. Let me just. Can you see me? Okay. Hi. Thank you for being here today. It's been really fascinating, listening to everything you've had to say, because we've mostly had designers and CEOs, so it's interesting to see how, from a marketing standpoint, how everything works behind the scenes. So I guess what I'm very curious about is that let's say Jimmy Choo wants to do a collection. How do you go about making that budget plan, making sure it's going to benefit everyone initially, in the sense of cost, production, and making sure it's efficiently put together? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So thankfully, that's not my job. That is the job of people way smarter than me, who work in, so always with a creative piece and design, there's design, right? And all they do is design, because that's what they're amazing at. But there's also a whole costing exercise, a margin, which obviously that is me. But so from a cost of goods standpoint, and kind of like what we were just saying about factories, so you have that piece of it, which is another team who negotiates the prices, people who buy the leathers, and you have to understand how many units you're buying to get the best price on the leather. And then everything rolls up to a gross margin, and gross margin and EBIT are things that are you'll learn about, or you've already learned about, that are hugely important from a budget standpoint. And so you have to understand all of those things in order to make sure that you're protecting that piece of the business. However, it doesn't matter which business you work in luxury or non-luxury. If a collection is bad, it's just bad. You know, there are things that are bad. And someone may just think, oh, let's design purple mesh shoes this season, and you're like, oh boy. So you have to figure out, okay, understood that purple mesh shoes are the thing of the season. They may not sell, so you need to figure out what else you can buy to offset the purple mesh shoes, right? So you always need to have a balance. It's like putting together a puzzle to make sure that you're protecting your margin and everything else, because what happens is then if things don't sell, as you know, then they go on sale and they get slashed to 40 off, and then 50 off, and then 60 off. And when you start getting into 60 and 70 off, no one's making money anymore, right? So that usually means something wasn't very successful, or it wasn't very commercial. So once you understand the formula, and I hate to use that word, but the formula of what you need to protect. So if I go to Milan and I see that purple mesh shoes are the thing, but I know I'm not going to sell a ton of purple mesh shoes, I also need to know how many black pointy toe pumps I sold, how many boots I sold, all of those things, so that you have that backup, right? That you walk into a store and you don't just see purple shoes at Jimmy Choo, that you make sure you have a balance. So it's just really swinging the pendulum. And making sure that you are hyper analytical in terms of what works and what doesn't work. And that is where you can get into tricky conversations, and what I said about sales, where you have to kind of be like the UN, because think about it, if you're a designer, right, which I'm assuming you are based on what's behind you, and someone says to you, I hate your yellow tank top that you're wearing today, and meanwhile you've designed 50 million yellow tank tops because you think that's the best thing in the world, but you have salespeople who come in and say they're not going to sell. It's like saying that you have an ugly baby, right? Because you created this yellow tank top. So you have to be so good with communication and say, okay, I love your yellow tank top, but I need you to know, I'm making this up, that in Denmark, people don't like yellow. So can you also make it in red and purple and green? And you as a designer will probably say yes, but I want you to make sure that the yellow one is the one that's in the store window, because that's what is your inspiration and that's what represents your point of view, right? So as long as you have good communication and understanding how to deal with creative people, because you guys are creative, everything's in your head, you're designing things based on emotion, you know, all of that. Then there's people like me who are like, okay, that doesn't sell, this sells. But you have to figure out, okay, if this is the inspiration, let's show this. This is the story that we tell. This is the marketing that we do. But you'll sell 80 million black tank tops. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's a balance between both. It's like commerce and creative. And when they're married and they're good, it's the best marriage in the whole world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like the concept of like, if you like one thing so much, might as well kind of get in every color. Or at least have the variety and choice.
Yeah.
Is what I'm kind of understanding from that.
Yeah, but as a creative person though, and I'm not a creative person, it's just, I can see it's so hard to have to say to someone, we don't like those shoes, or those shoes aren't going to sell. Like, I mean, it's like your blood, sweat, and tears designing this stuff, right? And then you've got someone saying to you, so you have to figure out how you can, as a designer also, I would give the advice to have an open mind, even though someone says, you know, I like your yellow tank top, I don't think we're going to sell 1 million units of it. Can you help me with other colors or with something else that will sell? And if you're a designer that can listen and get past the, oh my God, this was my favorite thing in the whole wide world, then you'll be super successful, because you have that open mind, and it's kind of like a business mind too, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a business. So there's definitely the aspirational things and the wow things that have to be in the windows and the magazines that make everyone come in and buy the black tank top, you know?
Okay. Yeah. Then I have one other question, because since your situation is a bit more unique in the sense of like you didn't find jobs like through connections and people, you're mostly recruited for those jobs. Yeah. What would you say is the best way to stand out, or what you think that you stood out in that made you be recruited, and is a good way for us to know in the future so we can become recruited as well?
straight up, hands on heart, every single job, I think, every single job I've got has been through LinkedIn. So I think LinkedIn is the best thing in the entire world. I think there's so many eyes and so many people on LinkedIn. I think making sure that you have a profile photo, don't just have that little weird cartoon head thing. Make sure that you have a photo so that, you know, it looks like you're actually engaged in LinkedIn, that you have a good bio, that you have any kind of experience, whether you did, you know, experience at school or different groups that you belong to. I think LinkedIn is amazing. And there's tons of recruiters, and most of the people, the only job I didn't get through LinkedIn was Ralph Lauren, because that was through someone who told a recruiter about me. But everything else has been on LinkedIn, and that's been my personal experience. Jimmy Choo was on LinkedIn, Canada Goose was on LinkedIn. There's a ton of people on LinkedIn, and just make sure that you keep on getting connections, connect with people, connect with anyone, like connect with like the CEO of like Jeff Bezos. He may not say yes, but just send invitations and connect with people, because they'll be surprised, because it's good to have connections, you know, and then when people are searching for certain jobs or internships and stuff, I think LinkedIn's a really good place.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the last question of the day is also out of chat. It's from Nimrita. She says, what would you say is the most important point to keep in mind during an interview?
The most important point to keep. I think listening is super important, and making sure you understand what they're asking you, because it's weird. And I think I did it too when I was younger. I think you're in such a rush because you're so excited over the interview that sometimes you don't listen to what the question is, and then you just start talking about how much you love the brand or something. I think really listen and like take pauses. And I'm saying this as I speak at 100 miles an hour, but take pauses and be well thought through in terms of what your responses are going to be. And whenever anyone asks you what your strengths or weaknesses are, always have an answer for that. And yes, of course, you can spin it into, you know, I like to work 24 hours a day, and I guess I would call that a weakness. Just have a good answer, because I find those questions, first of all, I find them obnoxious, because who's going to tell you they're bad at anything? You know what I mean? So I think they're ridiculous questions, but you will be asked a million times. And I do like when people ask you, you know, how would you react in this situation? And just be yourself, let your personality come out. And because if you don't let your personality come out, then you don't know what the company's like in terms of culture, and they don't know what you're like. So sometimes when your personality comes out and they're like, oh gosh, she just talks too much, she's not for us, that's a good thing. That's a blessing in disguise, right? Because it's the type of company that you wouldn't have fit into well anyway. So just be yourself, smile, relax as much as you can. Always dress up or dress the part. Like if you're going to work in a fashion company, don't show up in track pants, don't show up in like, and I don't mean that to sound like I'm 90 years old, but it's like, I would, if I could, and I did in most of my jobs, even in my 20s, if you can wear something from the brand that you're interviewing in, everyone notices. So if you can wear a Jimmy Choo, you go on the Real Real, or you go to Rent the Runway or whatever, and buy the dress of, you know, whatever brand you're interviewing for. I would highly, highly, highly suggest that, because when people come and they interview at Jimmy Choo and they're wearing a pair of Christian Louboutin shoes, I'm done. I'm done usually within the first 5 minutes, because for me, it's a respect thing, right? Like, you know where you're walking into. So why are you wearing, it's like walking into Ralph Lauren and wearing a Tommy Hilfiger, huge emblem on your shirt. It's just like, no. Like, do you know where you just walked into? So I have a really, really, really strong point of view on that. Some people might tell you very differently, but it's just like, it's a respect thing. You know what I mean? It's like when you walk into someone's house, you don't tell them you don't like the food that they just cooked. So show up and show up for the brand that you want to work for, and look like you want to work there. It would be my advice as well.
That's great advice. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that you remember that the person who's interviewing you, particularly when you're early in your career, you're probably going to be working with this person on a day in and day out basis. And
Totally.
you want to like them and you want them to like you. So the
Yeah.
more that you show who you are and try to make yourself a likable representation of yourself, I think
Yeah.
the better you're going to end up doing in that interview.
Totally.
And to your point, if they don't like you, then better you know now than in
yeah, exactly. It's like when
5
you go on a
weeks.
date. It's like when you go on a date. If you don't get a call back, great. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, this was amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And
this was awesome.
someday we'll be back again in person, which will be great.
Yes, I can't wait. I can't wait. And thank you for all the awesome questions. And if anyone has any questions or anything, shoot me an email on LinkedIn or whatever. I'm always happy. Carolyn, you've got my information. I'm always happy to help. So I'm here. I'm here.
Thank you. Awesome.
All
Great.
right,
Well,
guys,
stay
thank
safe.
you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Students, I'm just going to flash up the attendance question if you check out your screen. And I look forward to hearing your responses. Thanks. Does anyone have any questions for me? All right. Well, till next week, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was very good. I only just realized my camera
Thank you,
was not
Professor.
on.
Thank you.